Okay, here we are on Monday afternoon again, and thanks to a series of infinite coincidences, we can go and meet Pat McArt in Donegal. You ever think about that, Pat? Think of all the things that had to happen before you could speak to me now.
Oh, God, yeah. Hey,
Think about how to meet your father for a start.
Exactly. Jude, I remember one time sitting with this guy in Derry, and we were chatting about the changes in the world. I asked him, he was a farmer priest, and I asked him, did he still believe in God? He says, oh, yeah. And I says, why? He says, look at so much is unexplained. And he says, look at it like this. He says, he explained that he had some member of his family immigrant, a grandfather or someone to America, or a granduncle. And he said, imagine today, he says, I could sit in Derry Key and talk to my granduncle in America now. Back then, he says, they had to send letters and wait for months for letters to get back. And he says, the technology, he says, there's so much we don't explain or can't explain. So he says, don't ever turn around and say you understand everything. So coincidences are everywhere, my boy.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. In fact, you'd have been burnt for witchcraft if you'd tried doing what he was doing.
Exactly.
Anyway, let's go to a more serious matter. Well, that's serious too, but these are more public matters. The one that's caught both our eyes, I think, is this one, the tunnel. Boris was going to build a bridge, but now he's going to build a borough. And he's talking about building a tunnel, which will be 31 miles long from Larne to Stranraer, thereabouts, which seems to be a noble project. And I mean, fitting the challenge, the mighty challenge it poses is suited to the mighty man who has suggested it. What do you think, Pat?
Apparently there's this place, I read about this years ago, Jude, and I thought I was insane even then. But there's this place called the Beaufort Dyke, and apparently it goes down at least 1,000 feet, or maybe it's 1,000 meters. Now I'm open to correction either way. It goes down a hell of a way. And a couple of years back, I think about 2 years back, Boris suggested that they would build a bridge from, Now, Jude, have you ever gone over there in the winter's day? I've been on a ferry, and the ferry was going up and down like a yo-yo. So I'd love to know how the hell you drive a car across that on a winter's day. That's the first thing. And secondly, how far down how many towers would you need if you built a bridge? To get 1,000 feet down. And can you go around Beaufort Dyke? And I'm not an engineer or an architect, so I really don't know all these things. But it struck me as it was the biggest load of baloney ever. Now suddenly, because of there's this thing in Northern, I think you're throwing out sort of panaceas to sort of calm the waters, almost literally. So they're throwing out this tunnel. It's a high-speed rail group are behind this, and apparently they have sent a message to this guy. What's his name? I can't remember his name. Oh, Sir Peter Henry, who is preparing a report, and they're going to suggest to him that they now build a tunnel 31 miles from Larne to Stranraer. Now, Jude, that'd be a great idea, and I'd be all in favour of it. But let's be realistic. They're talking about bringing back rail to the northwest, reintroducing rail into Donegal, and somebody looked at it, it'll cost billions. It's never going to happen. Neither is this.
Well, you see, the thing is, I take a point about the roughness. I mean, if you look at Derry, the Foyle Bridge, just spanning the Foyle, it's a fair distance across, but it's nothing compared to 31 miles. And every whip around when the wind comes up, they have to close it, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I wouldn't, as you say, I'd need to have very high railings on either side of me if I was driving a car 31 miles across that open North Sea. But you see, it's been suggested by the high-speed rail group, and I mean, they're invested in it, whether, I don't know if they're invested financially or not, but they've certainly committed themselves to developing high-speed rail, and in the north of England in particular.
Yeah, they're talking about linking up the four nations of the United Kingdom. And this is what it's all about. And it's so they're saying it would unify the country, and it would also travel. They say expands the economy. But let's be realistic. Hey, come on.
Well, I probably would actually expand the economy. But if you stop to think about it, if you're looking at the island of Ireland, you'd be far better off going across at Holyhead, because that way you're much nearer the industrial south, rather than, I mean, if you've gone across to Stranraer, you'll know what a devil of a drive it is from there down through Carlisle and eventually find your way down.
But Jude, why would you bother putting spending billions? And it would cost billions to put in a 31-mile tunnel. Why not put on a couple of extra ferries and cheapen the price?
Well, I suppose, but then you could say the same thing about the ferry, the channel through the English Channel. The fact that it's there, I would imagine it has increased people's willingness to go to France. I mean, if I was a choice, I'd rather drive through the channel than I would sit on a ferry with my car to get across. But I think it's a question of priorities. But kind of nice to have, kind of nice. But when they say that it would help to bind Northeast Ireland or Northeastern Ireland closer to Great Britain, half the population here wants us to be less linked to Great Britain. And there's a border poll coming up very soon. And don't forget Scotland, which the other end of this tunnel would go to, may well have voted for independence by then anyway.
Yeah, and Jude, something, I think it's just been thrown out there like sweeties to children, it's keep them happy for 10 minutes. And it's been, I don't see, unless somebody produces a realistic report saying this is doable, and nobody so far has come anywhere close to saying this is doable. And Jude, come on, 31 miles across a very rough sea. Jude, I have been on, I remember one, and it wasn't even, I don't think, a winter. I remember coming over across, and it was a hell of a rough crossing that night. Most of the people on it were seasick.
Were you drinking?
Not at all. I was driving. So I'd love to know how the hell would you, make a tunnel across. I'll put it, I guess it'd be some achievement.
Well, I think you put your finger on it when you said this notion of sweeties. I would see it as a distraction because there's so many problems that we now have, and to give them some distraction. And you see, it's this whole thing of jam tomorrow. I mean, hunger today and jam tomorrow. The north of Ireland is very nervous about, certainly Unionists are nervous about the extent to which they're being cut off from the quotation marks mainland. And this clearly is an effort to smooth them down a little bit and say, look, you're literally physically connected to us. The other good thing about it, of course, is you say that even though there was an agreement that it should happen, it'll take years, maybe at least a decade, I would say, before the thing could be done. Remember how long the tunnel took?
And it cost about 3 times more, at least, than the original projections, which were quite high to start.
Yeah, that's right. And the money, when you talk about money, I mean, that high-speed rail group are the people who are going to do the thing in the north of England, and the price keeps doubling and trebling every so often. So, well, I don't know. I just think there's a lot
by the way, it's a natural follow-on to what you're saying. See, you've mentioned it, Jude, about this guy, Hugo McNeil. I think he's the guy, the former rugby player, who's the chairperson of the British Irish Association. He's sort of saying, he's another one on the list of saying we should have a border poll, but not yet, because he says there's a lack of respect for on both sides, but particularly I think he's having to go at the national side and calling for a border poll now. It's not the right time. What's your view on that?
Have we left the other one? Have we left the bridge?
Yeah, we have left the other one because that's because it's the same thing. This whole thing. I would say it's part of the same argument.
Well, his is an old argument. Hugo McNeil, is that his name? I'm not that familiar with him, but as you say, he is the chairman of the British Irish Association. I think in a perfect world, if we'd, with everything else right, you could say, let's become friends, and we're all in favor. And when we get to the point we're all in favor of United Ireland, it'll be so easy then to have it, rather than some people wanting it and some people not wanting it. But that's not what the Good Friday Agreement said. That's not what the Good Friday Agreement said. The Good Friday Agreement didn't say, whenever you have managed to combine hand in hand Unionist and Nationalist, Loyalist and Republican, then you can vote for United Ireland. Not so. That's not the way it was. It was simply when there was a majority of people in the North, in the opinion of the British Secretary of State, then we could have a border poll and see what happened. The other thing is really, he raises the question of the South. And that seems to me, you could answer that better than me, Pat, living in the South as you do. He says that the people of the South will not vote for a united Ireland, and they have to as well as the North, because if there was any sign that there wasn't reconciliation, complete reconciliation in the North, that they wouldn't want to have a bunch of Bolshevik Unionists as part of a single country.
Yeah.
Is he right in that?
There's a, you know, we always refer to them as a Dublin Four group, but what you mean is that they are really Irish Unionists. That's and Jude, like if you keep using that logic, there will never be a united Ireland, and that's I think what the whole plan is. But you know the thing that I think that really annoys most people, and particularly people.
Sorry, but let me stop you for a second. Do you really believe that quite firmly, seriously? Like those people simply don't want a united Ireland, and this is their way of avoiding it.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. I believe
this is the Dublin Four.
By the way, there's nine. I am not in the least bit interested in forcing 900,000 unionists into United Ireland against their will. But what I am equally, I don't think the nationalists who live in the North and the people of Ireland who live who want unity should be denied because certain people don't like that whole concept. And McNeill said that there was a series of articles in the Irish Times, and he said he says some nationalists said he accused them of being insulting towards unions, and he said the only one who seemed to get it was Mayhal Martin, who understood. I know every time I read that, I'm sort of going, Mayhal doesn't seem to get it that the nationalist people have rights. All he spends his time doing is attacking Sinn Féin very aggressively for saying, look, we believe in Irish unity. You know, what about Jude? I keep referring to this, but I regard it as a seminal moment. I really genuinely do. The day we went, I didn't even know you that well back then. We went to the Waterfront Hall, and there was 1,500 at least people in that. They're standing room only. And those people were the what I would say, the ordinary civic nationalists. They weren't anything other than that. And they were there. And these people are pissed off with the very, a lot of their identity being insulted, Curry My Yogurt, Banry and all of the boat that his name was changed from Irish into English. The LEFA grant taken away from a wee Gaeltacht scholarship thing on a week of Christmas and all that. Those people who live in Northern Ireland who want to be Irish, everybody's entitled to have their concerns dealt with by Mayhal Martin. If we keep on saying, the Unionists aren't happy, and until they are happy, we won't discuss a border pool. Right? Get a barge pole and keep pushing it ahead of you.
Right, exactly. I think that's the crux of the matter. That he seems to fail to spot the lack of logic in his argument, because if I'm a unionist, then clearly it's in my interests to put off the day when a border pool might happen, because there would be at least a chance that I would lose my position as part of the UK. So of course I'll keep quarreling at some kind of my level, at least, with nationalists and Republicans. Now, Hugo, if I may call him that, Hugo lists a number of things he says that need to be fixed first. I mean, we need to address and solve the role of Stormont, cultural issues such as flags, parades, and anthems, the role of the monarchy, the question of the NHS, the 12th of July, and it goes on. So now, my suggestion is he's spot on there. Those are things that need to be resolved, but they will never be resolved except you set up a date, perhaps, or at least there's a serious prospect of a border poll. Then people will sit down and say, geez, let's sort this out. If we had a united Ireland, what would our role be as British citizens? What kind of flag would we have? What about our annual parades? What about the anthem? That's the very thing that every nationalist and Republican I know wants to sit down and discuss. Yeah,
Jude, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. What we should be doing, Jude, let me repeat one more time. 4 out of the 6 counties of what constitutes Northern Ireland now have Catholic nationalist majorities. Belfast City Council is no longer dominated by unionism. Even the Stormont Assembly is not dominated by unionism anymore. There's a majority now the other way if they all voted. Right, let's go on. I can't remember. I think it's Professor, is it Philip Nolan? I'm not 100% certain. He's a demographics expert. He says by sometime later this year, Catholics will be in a majority of the population, or near enough.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, talk about, remember the concept of parity of esteem. Right, surely the nationalist people are entitled to have their concerns treated every bit as seriously as unionists. So are we as nationalists supposed to sort of turn around and say, oh, it doesn't suit unionists, so therefore forget about our rights?
Well, I think actually this is a sort of a brutal fact. I think that part of the reason that many of the Dublin Four sets, what you call the Southern Unionists, take the line they do, is that they're afraid of a backlash from loyalism if a border poll is called. They're fairly content, let's say, that you won't have the same kind of thing from Republicans. So in other words, it's the threat of violence that is stopping people.
But that's never, that's
implementing the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, but when Dublin talks about, it's obviously unionists, but in actual fact, the real threat that they're concerned about, and which is sort of swept under the carpet, it's, everybody knows it, but it's never discussed. One of the reasons they run away from it is because of that threat, or the perceived threat of violence. The only thing about it is, a lot of people I know are sort of saying, wait a minute, if that's the case, it's cowardice.
Well, it's certainly anti-democratic. But tell me this, supposing you had a chance to have a border poll, right, in, say, 5 years' time, and supposing you had a considerable number of unionists who were, or loyalists who were opposed to it, would you still vote for United Ireland? Yeah.
But Jude, I am not asking unionists to sort of do anything. I wouldn't.
Well, you're asking to do the one thing they don't want to do.
But I am entitled to vote for United Ireland. Like, Jude, the nationalist people, I'm not going down a Sinn Féin route here. I'm somebody stating fact. When the state of Northern Ireland was created, the nationalist people who lived there, or the native people, who we'll call them for want of a better word just at the minute, and that's a pejorative term in a sort of way. But anyway, they weren't asked or consulted. They were actually forced into an artificially created state.
Well, that's true.
There was no consultation, and they were just told, tomorrow morning you're going to be living under a different rules. You're no longer part of United, or the unitary state of Ireland. Now, and how democratic was that? So suddenly now there's this big sort of thing that's saying, oh, but you can't. The unions can't be. The unions, the Good Friday agreements there, they've been invited into sort of, let's have discussions. Let's not rush into anything. Wait for 5 years. Let's sit down and discuss the Constitution, the monarchy, the 12th of July, the flag, everything that you want to discuss. And look, let's be generous and accommodating. But hey, Jude, if we keep doing what Dublin 4 or the Mayhal Martin seems to want to do, is keep kicking the can down the road, we will never, ever get round to discussing the rights of the 50% of the population lives in Northern Ireland. We were nationalists.
I think the problem that Republicans and nationalists face, I think they're fairly content with the notion that they're going to be in the majority, as probably from this year, and it'll increase as time goes on. But they are aware of that, and as you say, that most of them are probably aware of the need to have discussions. But there's a couple of problems there. One is, will they have unionists to come and discuss with them? And secondly, will there be a structure or a place where they can come and do the discussing? Now, there was two things happening. We mentioned this. Two things happened over the last month that I think were really interesting, or at least they're concrete. There was, it's still online. If you go to YouTube, you can get it. Was it Ireland's Future, it's called, where they had something like 6 people from unionist background, let's say, on discussing what United Ireland might look like and what their fears and concerns and so on are. I think that's marvelous. And I'm a bit astonished, not astonished, but I'm disappointed that those who feel strongly about nationalism and republicanism and a united Ireland haven't gone out of their way to find structures where that kind of thing can happen on a regular and informed basis. The second thing I liked was that thing, and again, I've talked about this, that thing by, what's his name now? Billy
Leonard.
Billy Leonard, who came up with this idea of bonds being issued in order for the South to develop a really good health service, and then say, look, this is a health service we have, so stop worrying about it. It actually works. It's that kind of concrete proposal and then somebody to follow up with it and examine it and see does it make sense. I really feel there's an absence of that among Republicans and nationalists.
Yeah, I don't disagree. No, I'm coming from a one. No, that term going back to it, because I think that's the base level. Parity of esteem means both communities have rights. Now, this constant thing that unionism says no, so we all have to play ball. Like, that's great, but no, it's like a spoiled child getting its own way all the time. Dude, I have no intention of harming any unionists. I don't, and I have no intention of using any sort of violence to put 900,000 people. But I am saying it's very much on the agenda that the rights of the nationalist people to have their say can't be sort of withheld all the time because of this sort of perceived threat, or I'm going to throw the toys out of the pram from unionism.
Yeah. But if you examine the Irish Times, now I wonder if I'm wrong on this. I don't think I am. But if you had counted up the number of articles the last month, say, that have been similar to Hugo, is it McNeill's?
McNeill.
I think you would find there's been probably at least twice, maybe 3 times, maybe 10 times as many articles like that. In other words, pointing to the difficulties of having a border poll, urging the need to, as you say, kick the can down the road. There's been so many of those, and well, there's been a few, but not very many, which have argued the other side of the thing, where they've said, if you set a date for a border poll, or if you set up a system of citizens' assemblies or whatever, then we'll be in a position to start planning for something that's going to come.
Jude, using your example, right? Say 5 years' time, say this shared island, this, by the way, the shared island thing, I'd love to know, is it doing anything? I haven't heard of it mentioned since. Like, right, the T-shirts.
Well, he give money, fair play to him now. Mayhal Martin gave money so that young people in the north can, who are at university, can
the Erasmus
scholarships. I mean, that's good. That's a practical.
But no, hold on, Jude. That's and that's great. But no, you see this whole thing about the 5 year down the road. Like, see somewhere in the next couple of months, surely it's incumbent on somebody to do something more than a student program. Oh, lovely, it's very nice and all the rest. But right, let's start addressing the thing about the constitutional issues. Let's have a look at the maybe the flags and emblems, the what do you call it, the health service. Keep on going. Do we need to sort of change things? What would make for a sort of a ground level discussion with unionists about the future of this island? Here's what we are going to offer you. We're going to change the national anthem. We're going to look at links with Britain, east, west. We might even consider rejoining the Commonwealth. We're going to do whatever constitutional changes. The 12th of July will be acceptable to us as a national day of celebration. Whatever. I am only making this off the top of my head or whatever I can think of. But Jude, I have no problem discussing any of that as long as it's done in a context. But there are two sides here.
But you see, the thing is, your friend, for example, Gregory Campbell, will be the first to say, well, there's no point in discussing that. We're not going to do it. We don't want it. We don't want a united Ireland. So stop talking about it. Stop, making plans.
Well, you see, that's where me and Gregory diverge, because I'm saying, Gregory, you don't have that right to you don't prescribe the terms of any discussion.
Well, that's true, and there has been actually, I'll give 3 instances now. There was that Ireland's Future group, which was composed of about 4 or 5 or 6 unionist speakers, and I haven't seen it myself, but I gather it was very interesting, and they certainly were much more open than hardline unionists are. But I'm not. I don't know that there are some. I don't believe there are some unionists. I don't believe will ever sit down and talk, except they have to. Except they have to. And I think, who was it? Dr. Johnson said that the prospect of being hanged in the morning concentrates the mind wonderfully. I think the same thing applies. If you know there's a border poll going to come, and there really should. I mean, that's what the Good Friday Agreement was built around. If you know it's coming, say in 5 years or whatever, then I think you'll sit down then and say, I want to get a decent deal out of this. And if nationalists and Republicans are really as open as they say, well, then I think unionists will actually get themselves in a privileged position more than anything else. They'd also be a very powerful force if you stop to think about it in a united Ireland. They'd be 20% of the population for a start.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
That's no
No,
mean.
what I'm saying is, we need to have a real conversation. Let's start. I was going to say start a debate. That it's not a debate; it's a discussion. And see 5 years time. See if it turns out that the whole thing is unworkable. Maybe we might need to sort of have another look at it. But hey, let's have a look at it first. And at the very minimum, I think that should the border pool should be. We should aim for a border pool in 5 years.
But are you saying now that this discussion would come? You'd set a date, 5 years or whatever, for the border poll, and then you have the discussion. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And are you saying unionists would be in that?
This is the 15th of February,
Right.
21. Say we make it the 15th of February, 2006. And we say that day we're going to have a border poll. Right. But not, we start now for the next 5 years. We have a discussion. Now, if the border poll fails, it fails. If people vote on it and they want to stay, fair, I'll live with that. That's democracy. But I am also saying we have the right if the border poll goes the other way.
Okay, so you're saying
Ireland.
You're saying, you're saying you sit down and have a discussion. What if no unionist is prepared to sit down with you?
Well, Jude, that's their choice. Jude, that's the old one. No, I'm taking the ball in it, and you can't play. That's not the way it works. That's not democratic. The people who lived on the island of Ireland, the old native people, are as much entitled to their rights as they're sort of what they've called the Ulster Scots.
Well, the other difficulty is, in order to get to that point where you say there's going to be a border poll in 2026, you've got to get the British Secretary of State to say it should be called, and what's more, he thinks it's going to be won.
Yeah.
So, do you think that's going to happen?
No, I don't, because I don't think that's the way it's. In fact, the last thing Boris Johnson wants right now is Northern Ireland. While he would love to be rid of it from a whole lot of perspectives, the last thing he needs Northern Ireland shaving off, and then Scotland shaving off.
So well, then what we're talking about, Pat, is there's no point in us talking about 2026. Then there's no point in us talking about getting people to sit down and.
I totally disagree. There's a thing called the Dublin government, who is supposed to be the joint guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement. What Britain does, Britain's not going to do us any favours, but the Dublin government have a responsibility to look after the concerns of those people, of nationalist people who live in the north.
But it's still the British Secretary of State is the person who gives us the call.
Yeah, okay, but hey, if you create enough momentum, that person, he or she...
That's it. I think you put your finger on it, the momentum. It's my view that what you've said, if it was properly organised, would be a very good idea, even though the British Secretary of State hadn't called it. If over the next 5 years you were to have really seriously organised think tanks, citizens' assemblies, etc., with the door wide open and invitations to unionists to join it, if they wish, and if they don't, well, that's their own affair. But if that was done, and if concrete plans were mapped out, and if there was continual meetings, and if there was built up a momentum among nationalists and Republicans for this and an enthusiasm for it, I think that would put pressure. That would be something that would make the British Secretary of State think hard, and very likely, actually, if the pressure was sufficient, to agree that it should be called. Yeah,
I agree. But we have to start somewhere, Jude.
At the moment, we're not going very far, and it's been left to the likes of Billy Leonard and, well, I suppose the civic nationalism thing to some extent, in that, you had that meeting of those 5 or 6 unionists who, I suppose you would call them soft unionists. You see, there's a lot of, we'll leave this topic and leave it at that shortly, Pat. But there's a lot of talk nowadays about the fact, if you read the papers, they're saying that really what's happening is unionists, there's a lot of young people, unionists and nationalists, who don't give a damn about that stuff. They're interested in, their careers, they're interested in being entrepreneurs and so on. And they're really just bored by talk about, getting rid of the border. They're busy doing other things, and they think it's a backward-looking step to...
Jude, there's an element. Peter Sherlow, professor, he's the University of Ulster Irish Studies guy, and he came up with one...
Liverpool now,
Liverpool, He came up with quite a good one there some time back, and I think he says he called the concept interdependence, and he said, if we're really serious about the way forward, unionists really should buy into the fact that there should be much greater north-south cooperation, much greater. And he says, when that happened, a lot of the nationalists would simply say, right, this whole debate for unity would abate, or would be lessened considerably. So there was gains for the nationalists in the sense that their identity would be recognised, it'd be culturally recognised, there'd be respect for them, etc., etc. And what the unions would gain would be that the union wouldn't be broken. So he said both sides could claim, he says, if the union was not a big issue for nationalists because Irish language would be totally recognised, culture would be recognised, that there wouldn't be the same. People might say, "Oh, wait a minute, we like the National Health Service, and there's things here." So we get this dual identity. We're Irish, living on the island of Ireland. That's not a big deal. Now, Jude, maybe even that, throw that out there and explore it and say, right, how far can we go with that? Maybe that's a national step. I'm only throwing.
Yeah, well, I think I'd be open to anything going into debate as long as the debate was properly organised.
Yeah,
frankly, it's something I'd be quite opposed to that view you've just given or that picture you've just painted.
Yeah,
that picture.
But Jude, at least he was making a constructive suggestion.
Well, he's right. I think, he is right. And the more you meet people, the more you know people, the better the chances are you'll work with them and so on.
Yeah.
And actually, I think if you're looking for a concrete or a final chink of light at the end of the tunnel, not that tunnel, but another tunnel. If you're looking for a chink of light, it maybe would come with the fact that there is a border in the Irish Sea. I think the EU knows there's a border in the Irish Sea. They worked for it, they got it. And they're very glad it's not on the island of Ireland, because inevitably, if Ireland is treated as one unit, it's going to be playing under EU rules. And, what follows, who was it who wrote the piece that said politics follows economics?
George Osborne. Former Chancellor.
I think that's
the politics will follow the economics.
As a long-term thing, that's a very powerful force. It'll happen, but in the meantime, I think we should be working in it in a more specific way. And I would call on people, all right-thinking people out there, to watch this video and learn from it.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Collins.
Okay.
Good luck, Jude.
Right. We'll see you again. Thanks, Matt.